afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the floor framing webinar. My name is Nick, and I'll be doing the presentation with you today. Just like all of our previous webinars, everybody will be on mute, but if you do happen to have any questions at any point during our class, please feel free to go ahead and type that into the questions and answers section of the Zoom panel, and at the end of the class, I will go through and answer any questions that may have come up. Following our class, I will be sending out an email that will contain a document that's going to cover everything that we've talked about in today's class. Should you happen to have any questions while going over that document, again, please don't hesitate. Reach out to our support department. They will be happy to help you out. Again, today's class is on floor framing, and I'm just going to go over a quick little overview of what we're going to be talking about in today's class. So in today's class, we're going to be reviewing how to add in structural floors into an Envisioneer model. We're also going to learn how to customize your floor framing in detail to meet your specific construction needs. So let's first take a look at structural floor framing and how it works. So floors have framing members and settings assigned to them in their properties. By default, a floor is created automatically when you draw your exterior wall layout, provided that the layout is an enclosed space. As you create rooms, the automatic floor is divided so that each room has its own floor and consequently its own floor frame. Most builders do not frame in this way. Instead, they create a floor frame that spans from one exterior wall to the other. To create this type of floor framing layout in Envisioneer, you can create a structural floor and use its various insertion options, either be by perimeter, by room, or by picking points to insert floor sections that more closely resemble those that will be built on site. We're going to be taking a look at creating our custom floors for this design that you can see here on my screen. So when you insert a floor using the structural floor by picking points tool, you can define the size and the shape of the floor as well as where the span starts and ends. So let's insert a floor manually and we're going to edit its properties. So when I added in these walls, it's going to automatically create an automatic floor for me. So if I go up to settings and I take a look at the document settings, and I go into building aids, I can see that I have automatic elements and I have automatically insert floors enabled. So anytime I create a closed circuit of walls, it's going to automatically drop in a finished floor for me. This is a great way to very quickly add in a floor surface. So when you're looking at your model in 3D, a floor is already added in. However, a floor like this is not very intelligent. It doesn't have a lot of context commands to it. So if I right click, you can see here that I can't really do much with it. I can adjust the properties, I can delete it, I can elevate it, and I can change its appearance. That's basically all I can do with this floor. If I feel as if I'm going to need to add more detail to a floor, I can simply just delete the floor out, and that will remove the floor entirely from that model. If I feel like I'm never going to use automatic floors, I can set up my templates so that they never insert the automatic floor. So in your templates, you can go to your building aids and you can disable that option. If you feel as though you will use this, then just leave it enabled and you can delete it as needed. I'm going to delete mine for this purpose, and I'm just going to go back into 2D. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and I'm going to add in a structural floor. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to select under insert. You can select the floors option, or sorry, the structural floors option, and you can do structural floor by perimeter, structural floor by room, or structural floor by picking points. If you use the picking points option, you're going to specify each individual point of where you want that floor to go. If you do by room, it will add in a structural floor per room. So if you have your design broken up into individual spaces, you can add in a structural floor system into each room. If you use the structural floor by perimeter option, it will find the perimeter of your design and add the floor in no matter what you have added in on the interior. That is the option you're going to use most likely in your designs, is the structural floor by perimeter. And that's what I'm going to use here. I'm going to bring my mouse and I'm going to select the type of floor that I want to add in. So on the right-hand side, my catalog has populated to show me structural floors with a sill plate and structural floors with no sill plate. What I want to do in here is I want to select the floor system that's going to closely match what I want to use for my design. I'm just going to use the 2x10 floor system, and I'm going to use with the sill plate. I'm going to double click on that so that we can see some of the properties for this particular floor. So this 2x10 floor system with 3/4 inch OSB sheathing has general properties, and we can see that underneath our components. What this entails is the joist direction, the joist spacing, and how we want these joists to react at a bearing or a break point in the floor. By default, it will break and stagger the joists, and they will offset a distance of 1 foot from the center line. This will give you that staggered joist look that sits on top of a beam. Alternatively, we have in the dropdown a holdback option. Now, a holdback option is ideal for creating a recessed beam where the joists are going to be flush mounted to the face of the beam itself. When using the holdback option, the distance that you enter in here will be half the thickness of the beam. So if you're adding in an 8-inch thick beam, you would add in a distance of 4 inches. This way, it holds the joist back 4 inches from the center line on each side of the beam. And this will put the joist on the face of the beam itself. I'm going to change mine back to just being staggered. And the joist direction, you can adjust this after the floors have been inserted. 90 degrees will run left and right on your screen. 0 will run your joists up and down on your screen. And based on the design that we have here, the joist can run in either direction, because I can add a bearing point here or here to break up the span of the joist. So it doesn't matter in our particular design which way I run these joists. I'm going to leave mine at 90. The sheathing option will allow you to choose the type of sheathing you want to include in your floor. In this case, again, we're using the 3/4 inch OSB tongue and groove sheathing. It's going to have its own phase and its own usage. This is important for quantity purposes. I want to make sure that the framing for this floor is broken up into the correct usages and phases so that it is depicted correctly in the quantities. I have my joist material, which again will be using the specific joist that I have defined, which is again the 2x10. Again, it's going to be a part of the floor system phase, and it's going to have a usage of floor joist. That way, when I see the 2x10 in my reports, I'm going to be able to denote very quickly what 2x10 is being used for what. So I'm going to see 2x10 floor joist. I'm also going to see 2x10 rim joist as well. So that's why you have that usage. So again, to break it up in your reports. We have a sill plate option in this design. So this one is going to be using a sill plate, and it's going to be using just a 2x6 treated sill plate. And it's going to have a rotation of 90 degrees, so it sits flat on top of our wall. This is going to be a part of the foundation construction, and it's going to be a part of the sill plate usage. So again, I will see that in my reports as a sill plate. Fan joist and rim joist, again, are going to be your rim joist materials. And then we also have opening headers where you can have that defined as a header. And again, you can choose the type. All 3 of these will typically be the same size as the joists, but in some cases, like in a engineered floor, you may want to use an LVL for these pieces, while the joist will be a I joist. So in some cases, you will have different materials in these areas. I'm just going to simply click cancel because I don't want to make any changes. And then I'm just going to select that floor once again. I'm going to bring my mouse into the middle of my design. And once I do that, as soon as I left click once, it's going to add in that joist for me. And in this case, it's going to show my joist running up and down on my screen. I may have gotten my directions mixed up in my previous mention of this. So it looks like 90 runs up and down and 0 will run left and right. Now that I have the joists added in, I can do a couple of different things to them. If I do want to adjust the actual direction of the joists, so let's say I do want them to run left and right, I can adjust after the fact. Now, what I'm going to show you here is something that you will need to practice. When you add in a structural floor, it adds in a structural floor line that uses a dash dot line style. What I always get people to do when trying to select a structural floor is to zoom in on a corner. Any corner in your design. Doesn't matter if it's an exterior corner or an interior corner, you're just going to zoom in on the corner. We inserted this floor based on the perimeter, and the perimeter in this case is going to the edge of the core. So we can see this brown line right here is the edge of the core. When I left click there, in Envisioneer, you're always going to select the highest element. So in this case, the wall is higher than the floor. So it's going to select the wall first. And I can see that it says one object selected. Primary is 2x6 cement board panel, and it's a wall. I want to cycle down and select the next element. In Envisioneer, we have a command called cycle select. And all I have to do here is hold my shift key down, and with the scroll wheel on my mouse, I can move that scroll wheel or scroll forward, and it will now move to the next element. As you can see, I now have a green dash dot line style selected. And when I look in the lower left-hand corner, I can see one object selected. Primary is 2x10 floor system with 3/4 inch OSB sheathing, and it is the structural floor system. That is what I want to see. With that selected, and again, I'm just going to do that one more time so you can see it. Select the edge without moving your mouse away from that point. Hold your shift key down, use your flywheel on your mouse to cycle through, and you will then select the next element in that hierarchy of elements that are in your design. So this one is now selecting the structural floor. You can also tell you have the structural floor selected because you'll get a marker that looks like a little red arrow. This lets you know again that you are working with the structural floor, but the best way is to check the lower left-hand corner. With the structural floor selected, I can now right-click and I can go into the structural floor properties. And in here, I can adjust the direction to be 0. And when I say OK, it's going to update and regenerate all edges. With this option selected, it will always regenerate the edges anytime you make an adjustment to the floor or to the walls themselves. So it's always going to try and make sure that it stays intact, and it's going to regenerate for you automatically. We're going to say yes, I want to regenerate, and it now flips the joist in the opposite direction. So now that we have the floor joist added in, we don't want to span this entire distance. That's going to be a little bit too long of a run for our joist in this case. So what I want to do here is I want to create a breakpoint or a bearing line that will represent where my beam is going to sit in my foundation plan. So with the structural floor still selected, I'm going to right click, and under structural floor, so not under properties, under structural floor, you're going to have an insert bearing line. I'm going to click on that. I'm then going to zoom in on this corner, and I'm going to left click once right here. I'm going to move my mouse up, and I'm just going to stretch it all the way up so that it meets this wall. If you remember back when I showed the joist at the bearing point, we used the stagger option. So now all our joists are going to stagger at that breakpoint. Now that we've added in our structural floor, it's also going to be included in our 3D view. So if I kind of just move my mouse around here, and let's do a rendered outline view so you can see this a little bit clearer, we're going to see our sheathing, we're going to see our joist material, so our band and rim joists, and underneath we're going to see our actual joists. And then we can also see our sill plate. When I move the mouse towards the inside, we're going to see all of our joists, and then they're going to be broken and staggered along that line. This is important, again, because we want to make sure that our quantities are showing up with the correct amount. So we don't want to span that entire distance. We want those joists to be broken and then quantified individually to meet up with that bearing line itself. I'm going to go back into 2D. And the next thing we're going to be looking at is floor framing. So you can add in a framed floor in Envisioneer as well. The floor tool can also be used by selecting the floor by room, floor by perimeter, or floor by picking points option. This will add in a finished floor that can also contain framing. So after you've inserted your floor by using the floor by room, floor by perimeter, or floor by picking points option, you can select it and then right-click and select its properties. So we inserted a structural floor. But let's say we want to add in our own floor off in a different room. We can do, again, floor by room, floor by perimeter, or floor by picking points. I'm going to select the floor by picking points, and the catalog will then populate on the right-hand side with all of the different floor finish materials that we have. And in here, you can see that we have wood floor, ceramic tile, carpet, and we have vinyl floors. All of these have a surface as well as framing information assigned to them. If I select hardwood and I double click on it, in the catalog, we can see that it's showing a thickness of 1/4 inch. So let's select cancel and let's add in a floor. And I'm just going to create a 15-foot by 15-foot floor. And then we're going to say finish. So by default, this floor is set to general. If I want it to show actual framing, I can select the framed option. And what this will do is it will now add in framing once I specify it. So I can click the specify framing option right down here. Again, it has to be a frame type to have the specify framing option enabled. And then I can go through and I can adjust it to say, yes, I want to show the 2x10 material. I want to show the rim joists. I want to show the opening headers. So all of those will now be inserted. And I can say OK and OK. And what we're going to see in our 3D view is we're going to see that joist material start to show up. And did I specify? So everything is turned on. Oh, I probably need to turn on the floor framing. So right now, I don't have framing turned on. Once I turn framing on, I will then see all of the framing for that floor. So if I go to define and turn that off, you're not going to see the framing for that particular floor. So those are two different ways that you can add in the framing for your floor. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in a floor finish. So if you remember, back at the very beginning of the class, I removed the finished floor that was automatically inserted, mainly because it didn't have a lot of intelligence to it. And I may want to make some adjustments to that floor in the future. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in a finished floor material into our design. To do that, I'm again going to use the floor by room option. You can do floor by room, by perimeter, or by picking points. I'm going to do room because if I do perimeter, it is going to add in a floor surface all the way to the edge of my core. And that's not how a floor would be added in. It would actually be added in up to the interior edge. So by adding it by room, it's going to move the edge of that floor in. So we're going to do floor by room. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find the floor material that we want. And let's just grab the hardwood floor. You're going to notice that as soon as I bring my mouse into my drawing area, in the lower left-hand corner, I have what we call a base height. Now, in Envisioneer, whenever you add something in, it is always inserted. I'm just going to go to the building locations. I'm going to click on edit here. It's going to insert it. This is the top of our framed floor. So everything that we insert is based off the top of the framed floor. So our walls are sitting on top of our framed floor. Our measurements from our head heights to our ceiling heights, again, are all measured off of top of framed floor. We're adding in a finish that's going to sit on top of the frame floor. So I need to move this floor material up. So what I'm going to do here is, again, I'm going to select that floor by room. I'm going to select my hardwood. I'm going to bring it into my design area. And instead of just entering in a base height of 0, I'm going to type in a base height of what I feel the thickness of that floor should be. This can be the thickness of the underlay material as well as the thickness of the floor itself. You can make that decision. I'm just going to go up 1/4 of an inch. Now, that 1/4 of an inch has not been accepted yet. If I move my mouse, that distance goes away. So what you want to get in the practice of is moving your mouse into your design area, taking your hand off of the mouse, typing in your distance of 1/4 inch, and then pressing tab on your keyboard. Once you press tab on your keyboard, that value is now locked in, and I can move my mouse wherever I want, and I can left click once to place that floor in. I'm going to right click and select finish. And if I go back into my 2D designers view, I can now see that floor is now sitting on top of my frame floor. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, an automatic floor, when inserted, is great for just a very quick representation of where the floor is going to be, but it doesn't have a lot of additional commands to it. When you add in a floor manually and you click on it, you get the green line, but you also get all of these grips that will help you modify the shape of the floor itself. So I can move the edge of the floor material. I can adjust its shape by, again, just moving the grips around. I'm just going to edit, undo those. Also, when I open up the right-click context menu, as you can see, I have a lot more commands available to me. And the biggest one for floors is cut opening. If I ever want to show a stairwell going down into a basement, or if I'm on the 2nd floor and I want to show a stair going to the ground floor, if you have the automatic floor added in, you will not have the cut opening option. So you will want to make sure you're taking advantage of the floor surface tool to get the cut opening option. Again, when we look at that in a 3D view, just so we get an idea of what we're working with here. So now you can see, as I pull my camera back, I'm going to drop it down just a little bit. So we can now see that that floor is sitting 1/4 inch higher than our subfloor. And when we get over to a wall, that floor material is sitting towards the inside of my wall face. It's not going all the way to the edge of my perimeter walls. So this will give me a correct quantity because it's showing me a true measurement to edge of drywall, not to edge of exterior core. Now, again, I just want to show the cut floor opening option so you can see how that works. And another command that I like to use, you can do this in this designer's view as well if you would like. All you have to simply do is select the floor, right click, and then you can select cut opening. When I cut an opening, I can define exactly where I want this floor to go. I'm just going to say 3 feet in this direction, and we're going to go down 12 feet and then over 3 feet. And then we'll say finish. That will cut the floor out for the surface. If I want to cut the actual structural floor, then I need to select the structural floor. So again, zoom in on a corner, select the edge, hold your shift key down, cycle select to the next edge. And again, we always go to a corner because the lines will always show up in a corner. And now with the structural floor selected, I'm going to right click, cut opening, and it will cut the opening out for the structural floor. What this will do, when I go back into my view filter and I want to turn the framing on for my floors here, I'm going to say structural floor framing on. it's going to add in the structural floor framing for that particular floor. If you remember back at the beginning, when I selected the structural floor, I had the regenerate faces option enabled. If you start to edit the structural floor, you may want to get in the habit of coming in here and turning this off. Because if you then later go in and move a wall and it adjusts the framing of the floor, it's going to revert back to the original. So all the work that you're about to do to that floor will be lost. So this is where you have to take into consideration the timing of when you're doing this. And if the plan is set, you're not worried about adjusting walls anymore, then uncheck the regenerate components and you can say, okay, now I can go through and I can start to adjust how this floor would actually be framed. I would probably take this opening and I would probably go all the way to the edge here. So I'm just going to bring that edge and I'm just going to use the grips here to snap to where I want it to go. And again, I'm going to grab this edge of this joist and I'm going to snap it to there. Over here, it looks like I have this joist, which is running all the way to here. So I'm just going to stretch that guy. And we're going to duplicate this guy down. So we're just going to go duplicate. And we're going to be able to duplicate this and place it exactly where we want it to go. Yeah, like that. And then we can take this edge. And again, we're going to stretch it down. And again, this edge, we're going to stretch it down. And then this, we're going to snap it to the edge of here. So now we've created where our joists are going to bear on that. So we have an actual span here. If you wanted to double up the sides of the opening, you could. We're going to add in the headers now. So I'm going to grab this option here. And actually, I believe this one will come up as a header. And we go to quantities. Yeah, so this one here is a header. So I'm going to go in and say duplicate. I'm just going to duplicate him to there. And then I'm going to stretch it, rotate it, and I'm going to move it into place. So I want the header designation. You can use a joist and adjust the designation if you wanted to as well. Either way will work. I'm just going to grab the two or the option that's already in there, and then I'm just going to duplicate it. And now that I've created these two, they're at the correct size for that opening. I've doubled up my headers for my opening. Now I'm just going to duplicate it from that edge, and we're just going to go in and say move. That didn't duplicate, so let's go back to undo. We will do that one more time. Duplicate. From there we go. And we're going to go all the way down and we're going to snap to that opening. So now I have created my framed opening. When I go into a 3D view and I want to see how that looks, I can now see my joists extending up to my framed opening. And then I have my header material on either side of the opening itself. If I go in and move a wall now, the floor isn't going to update and I'm not going to lose all that work, but I will have to manually adjust all of the member material as well. So you want to make sure that you get the walls in stone before you start editing your floor framing. Again, I know changes happen in designs quite regularly, but again, you want to try and get it as close to being in concrete or in stone as to where the walls are going to sit before you start editing your floors and your openings. I'm just going to edit undo that to bring that wall back to where it was. And that covers everything that I wanted to show you in today's class in regards to floor framing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the questions and answers portion of the class. So if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type those into the questions area, and I will do my best to answer those for you. While I'm waiting for questions to come in, I'm just going to go over a quick review of what we've covered in today's class. So Envisioneer provides various options for inserting floors and floor framing into your designs. The structural floor tool will insert all of the components of the floor based on the properties of the structural floor that is selected. The structural floor can then be modified to add in bearing lines and adjust the framing base points. The floor tool can also be used to add in framing by specifying the floor as a frame floor and then assigning the correct members to their floor components. The floor tool adds in your floor finishes like tile, carpet, or hardwood, and then can be elevated to the right height based on the material that is being used. So again, I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, so I'm just going to pause for just a moment to see if anybody is typing a question or has any questions. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, I will be sending out an email that's going to contain a document of what we've covered. Should you happen to have any questions while going over that document, again, please don't hesitate. You can contact our support department and they will be happy to help you out with any questions you might have. Perfect. Well, again, there doesn't appear to be any questions, so I do want to thank everybody for attending today. I do look forward to speaking with you all again very soon. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.